I'm going to explain this to you first. By the way, it's me down here in the corner, Mr. O'Brien. This is a handy dandy chart I found on the internet, the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, what they don't tell you at the beginning is Abraham historically is the first person to respond to God's revelation. Abraham's son is Isaac. Isaac's son is Jacob. Jacob wrestles with an angel, and God changes his name to Israel, meaning he who wrestles with God. Jacob, also known as Israel, has 12 sons by different wives. And here you see the list of them on the left in the blue part. Now, Psalm 78. Let's take a look at Psalm 78 real quick, although it's going to throw us out of this little thing that I had set up. And of course, that's not it, but this is it. Psalm 78 gives a synopsis of the history of the people of Israel, ending at some point before the apparent invasion of the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. At least they don't mention that in this psalm. They stop before that happens. So the psalm was at least written before 586 BC, when Judah, the southern kingdom, was invaded. But what does this stuff mean? Then he, God, rejected Joseph's family. He did not accept Ephraim's family. No, he chose the tribe of Judah, and he chose Mount Zion, the place he loves, where he built his temple and where David reigns. He rejected Joseph's family. He did not accept Ephraim's family. Well, that gives us a clue that this psalm was probably written after the split between the two kingdoms. The kingdom in the north is Israel, but remember, it's also called Ephraim, named after one of the tribes that lived in the northern kingdom. And the southern kingdom, Judah, is named after the tribe that David came from. So Judea, named after Judah, is the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom is informally called Ephraim. So if we go back to that handy dandy chart that I found, it might help explain some of the confusion there at the end of Psalm 78. So there are the 12 male children of Israel, also known as Jacob, on the far left. Now, you can always pause this and read some of the details the person who made this chart put in, and they're pretty interesting. But let's go to the middle where it says 12 territories in the red box. After the people of Israel leave their captivity in Egypt and cross through the Red Sea led by Moses and end up eventually in the Promised Land, you have 12 allotments of territory given to the 12 tribes. But there's a little footnote here. Look back over to the left. Joseph has two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Joseph was born from Rachel. Now, Joseph doesn't get any territory. His two sons get territory. But that would mean there would be 13 parcels of land distributed to 12 tribes minus Joseph, plus Manasseh, plus Ephraim. That would be 12 minus 1, plus 1, plus 1. There should be 13 allocations of territory. But Levi is one of the sons of Israel, and Levi ends up being the tribe that the priests come from. And because the Jewish priests, it's their business to serve God, they're not given a territory. They're supported by all the other territories. So the territories you end up with include 2 allocated to Joseph's sons, but none to Levi. So these are the 12 territories. And by the time the kingdom splits, so look in the upper right, you have Israel, the little green box there on the left-hand side, has a new king from the tribe of Ephraim with a capital in Samaria. It has a new religion in the sense that they don't really follow God the Father, not completely, and therefore they fall to Assyria in 2 Kings 17 in the year 721 BC. On the right, in the blue box, Judah, the southern kingdom, after the two kingdoms split, they split again after the death of King Solomon. Judah keeps the tribe of Benjamin, keeps the tribe of Levi, Other families join in here and there. Judah, however, falls to Babylon, as told in Second Chronicles. Can't tell what that says, as told in Second Chronicles. Now, that happens in 586 BC. So it sounds as if Psalm 78 is written at some point between, no, let's get out of this. How do you do? I'm so good at this, but I'm so bad at this. How do you get out of this? I don't want to share. I just want to go back. Let's see what happens. No, I'm sharing. At any rate, Psalm 78 sounds like it was written sometime after the split between the two kingdoms, because it keeps talking about how God has rejected Ephraim. He's rejected the family of Joseph, which means he's rejected Joseph's sons and their territory. Joseph's son in the north is Ephraim. He's rejected Ephraim. He's basket of the southern kingdom. The tribe of Judah, the tribe of Benjamin is also part of the southern kingdom, and the Levites are still involved in the temple worship because Solomon builds a temple. David's son builds the temple there in Jerusalem. Now, if you don't understand that stuff, I know I'm covering a lot, but this really helps. You've got to kind of keep this big picture of what happens in the history of Israel into account. And I mean, you've got these big moments. You've got Abraham responding to God, God asking him to sacrifice his son Isaac, but then God promising Abraham that he will provide another sacrifice. Then we have Isaac's son Jacob wrestling with the angel, Jacob's name changing to Israel, Jacob having 12 children. All of them, well, but Joseph, one of the 12, being sold into slavery in Egypt. Eventually, they all end up in Egypt during a famine. They spend about 450 years in Egypt. Moses comes along. He leads his people through the Red Sea and into the Promised Land, but they keep complaining. And after 40 years, Joshua comes along and leads the people of God into the Promised Land, where he then allocates divisions of land based upon the 12 tribes, not counting Joseph or the Levites, but counting Manasseh and Ephraim, the sons of Joseph. And then they're unified as a nation. First, they have judges who judge them, but eventually by about 1000 BC, they are unified under King Saul, who is replaced by King David. David then establishes his capital in Jerusalem. David's son Solomon unifies and uses slaves and uses taxation to build a gigantic temple and a palace. But then Solomon's son Rehoboam is a jerk, and he only listens to his frat boy buddies. And there's a split between the tribes, and the southern tribes stay in their territory, the northern tribes in theirs. The psalm was probably written after this split because it talks about God rejecting the northern tribes, but it doesn't mention the invasion by the Assyrians into the northern tribes, and it doesn't mention the Assyrians threatening to invade and destroy the southern kingdom, which we're reading about as we continue to work our way through the book of 2 Kings. So it also doesn't say anything about the invasion by the Babylonians, which happens in 586 BC, in which the temple is destroyed. It says the temple will stand forever in Psalm 78, but it's destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BC. And the Jews are taken into exile into Babylon. That's the overall picture. Now, eventually, a remnant comes back from Babylon. They build the temple again, but they don't follow God as they should, and there are more prophets who come along. The entire area is then invaded by and under the control of the Hellenistic Empire, Alexander the Great, and the Jews start turning toward the paganism of the Greeks, the Hellenists, and there's a revolt and there's trouble and so forth, and then eventually the Romans come in and control that whole territory. By then, you eventually see the birth of Christ, and you see another destruction of the temple in AD 70, which is about 40 years or so after the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ. And then you don't see Israel as a nation again, as a nation state, until 1948, when it's established after World War II. So that's a thumbnail sketch. There's so much more to say, but you've got to keep that outline in your head, or the historical points of interest in the Old Testament won't make any sense. As, of course, this whole video didn't make any sense, but we're not going to nitpick, are we?